I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off-road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
From an evolutionary point of view, we're the same creatures we were 20,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago, maybe just at a primal level. We don't want stuff.
Well, we don't want stuff, but we do want stuff. And I mean, I think you're pointing out something very important, which is people do tend to project their identity into their environment. And objects do remind us of the people and places and activities we love. And we do want to shape our environment to reflect something about ourselves. And even when you look at like nomadic people tons of thousands of years ago, they had decorative objects. They would bury things. It's a very human thing to want to have these objects. What is helpful is to have things that you have mindfully chosen. So part of it is to pick the thing that truly does embody what you want to remember, what you want to shine a spotlight on, and then get rid of the things that are just, again, kind of clogging it up.
So it seems like there is a theme, which is that clutter is not necessarily just physical clutter. There's also kind of the mental clutter
100%.
Of not trying to do all these things that are not necessarily, kind of central to who you are. And all of these things are related, just kind of having a less clutter in our lives, both internally and externally.
This is great because one of the real principles that I believe in is don't try to change yourself, change your environment.
My problem is right before the beginning of a podcast, I get a little nervous and I forget everything.
Oh, I know the feeling.
So I always have like a little list in the beginning.
As one does, yes.
All right, Jay, we ready? So once again, Gretchen Rubin, welcome back to the podcast. I think you've been on this like your third time on.
I think this is my third time on. Yes, thank you.
I think you came on for either the Happiness Project or your book after that, Happier at Home. And I think you were also on for Better Than Before.
Yep.
And now you're on for your brand new book, which I really enjoy, Outer Order, Inner Calm, which I would say is like, I know you're going to hate this and people are going to say this, but this is like your version of Marie Kondo's book.
It is tackling this idea of outer order. So, Marie Kondo has her way, and I have kind of a different way, but we're definitely aiming in the same. But, she's sort of magical and I'm practical. She's the expert that you hire, and I'm the friend who comes over and sits on the side of the bed and drinks coffee while you go through your closet.
And the basic idea is that we kind of live maybe over-cluttered lives, or at least we're not necessarily always happy with the objects we have in our lives, whether they're too much or too little or whatever.
Right.
And it's kind of finding that right balance of order and cleanliness and not needing as much or getting rid of old stuff so that we reach kind of this optimal level of happiness with what we have.
Exactly. I think for a lot of people, you just feel sort of clogged up. Like there's just sort of too much stuff going through. And when you get rid of the things you don't need, don't use, or don't love, then you just have more space. You have, you can see what you love better. You can make better use of what you have. And there is sort of a sense of calm that comes from, a friend of mine said, I haven't seen the floor of my closet in years. It just feels so good just to see the floor. And I think that a lot of people feel that way. It's kind of to a crazy amount. It's always interested me how much of a charge people, and I include myself, the charge that people get from creating outer order. It's like there's sort of an extra emotional buzz to it. That's always intrigued me.
Well, why do you think that is? Like, why do you think seeing the floor of the closet as opposed to, let's say, having all your clothes there and other junk there and your kids' junk and junk from 2 houses ago still there, unpacked in boxes and paperwork?
Yeah.
Why do you think clearing all that up and seeing the floor and having just minimal stuff there makes people happier?
I think there's a bunch of things going on. I mean, first, just like on the sheer practical level, like it's easier to find things, it's easier to clean, it's easier to put things away. So just life feels easier. But then I think there's a lot of emotion attached to things. And a lot of times stuff that we have can have guilt attached to it or regret. Or kind of a sense of not living up to a fantasy. So maybe I've half finished a needlepoint project and I feel guilty about the fact that I haven't finished. Or I feel regret because I spent a lot of money on a coat and I've only worn the coat one time. Or maybe it still has the tags on it. Or I feel like this fantasy, like I was going to learn to play the guitar and it was going to be amazing. And I have the guitar and the music stand, but I don't really play the guitar.
So it's like all these things, like you're almost saying like lots of extra objects are basically extra, like material manifestations of regret.
Yes.
It's like a library of regrets, like all your extra stuff.
It is, and that's why I think people are often very surprised at the emotional relief that they get from getting rid of those things, because you get them off your shelves, but you also get them off your conscience. And so once you resolve them by sort of saying, well, I'm not going to finish this project, so I'm going to get rid of it, or this coat, I'm going to give it away so that somebody who needs a warm winter coat will put it to good use. Then it kind of wipes away those bad feelings. That library now has, you're not facing that. So that's part of it. And then I think also a lot of time there's sort of unfinished business or like a lack of curation because we haven't wanted to face the decision fatigue of what to keep and what to not keep. So it's easier to keep everything than to pick and choose, So, okay, my kids have outgrown their clothes. It's easier just to put everything up in the attic than it is to kind of go through week by week by week and say, like, is this worth keeping? Should I give this away? Is this like basically just a rag? Rather than or like, okay, I have, like I just went through this. I just went through this last week. I'm looking through my kitchen. I find 2 garlic presses. Why do we have 2 garlic presses? I don't know. So then I'm like, let's give away a garlic press. And then a week later, I'm like, but we don't even use 1 garlic press. Why do we have any garlic presses? Let's give away both garlic presses. But that kind of took a little bit of decision making for me. A lot of times it's easier just to leave them in the drawer and not think about it. So I think sometimes too, we have put off that decision making, but then when we actually sit down and face it, we feel tremendous relief in just thinking, okay, everything's been sorted out properly.
So regrets, decision fatigue. There must be something to the fact that, is there something primal, do you think? Like let's say 20,000 years ago, and we were living in tribes and we had to move around quickly, we were more nomadic. People didn't accumulate things. It's not like you could accumulate furniture, right? Because you couldn't move. You had to basically just get up and move if you were attacked or if there was no more food left. It's sort of like from an evolutionary point of view, we're the same creatures we were 20,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago. Maybe just at a primal level, we don't want stuff.
Well, we don't want stuff, but we do want stuff. And I mean, I think you're pointing out something very important, which is, people do tend to project their identity into their environment. And objects do remind us of the people and places and activities we love. And we do want to shape our environment to reflect something about ourselves. And even when you look at like nomadic people tens of thousands of years ago, they had decorative objects. They would use things, they would bury things just as beautiful, as beautiful objects to accompany a dead person. When you're like, well, why would they do that? Why would they use up their stuff that way? It's like, it's a very human thing to want to. Maybe you can't have something that weighs a ton, but people still do have these objects. But I think what is helpful is to have things that you have mindfully chosen and are truly what you love, and not just a bunch of meaningless things. So it's like, you can have, people talk about mementos. It's like, okay, well, you can have 50 mementos, in which case, like, you can't even manage. Like, if you have 50 papers, you have all your notebooks from college. It's like, they're just going to sit in a box in the basement, and eventually they'll get flooded and you'll throw them away. But if you picked one thing that's like the iconic thing, or like the one notebook that meant the most to you, and you put it on the shelf, then you could appreciate that. So part of it is to pick the thing that truly does embody what you want to remember, what you want to shine a spotlight on, and then get rid of the things that are just, again, kind of clogging it up.
Well, let's reel back a second, because you've obviously put a lot of thought not only into this, but into happiness in general.
Yeah.
What sort of activities and habits create higher levels of happiness? And your first book, The Happiness Project, and it wasn't your first book,
Right?
But it was like
The first in the series, kind of. Yeah.
It was. I think it sold millions of copies. It's certainly how I knew you, and I forget what was going on in your life. You were you wanted to be happier, and in very A.J. Jacobs style, rather than just writing about research on happiness, you did all the things required to make yourself happier. Like, what were some of the things you did that led to that book?
I was my own guinea pig. So I was like, what happens if I go to bed earlier? What happens if I clear clutter? What happens if I started children's literature book group? What happens, So I tried to do a bunch of different things to see like what would make me happier.
And right now, years later, what changes in your life that you made then still exist, or what ideas still exist that are make you happier?
Well, just about all of them. I mean, I've tried now so many things, and I did my research, so I tried to pick things that would make me happier. And for the most part, the things did make me happier. So I continue to do just about everything. One thing that I did not continue was the gratitude journal. I found keeping a gratitude journal deeply annoying. And it turns out research shows that for many people, you should do it like twice a week, not every day, I guess.
So gratitude journal is like you list all the things you were grateful for that day.
Or like 3 things that you're grateful for that day. Or then people have things where it's like they go around the kitchen table and they say one thing they're grateful for. I find this deeply annoying. I don't know why. But anyway, so that was something that did not work for me. But that is sort of classic happiness advice. It works for many people. Did not work for me. One thing I tried was meditation. I've tried meditation twice, like good solid tries. Does not make me happier. Does not do anything for me. So I've tried it and given it up, because those are but just about everything that I've tried has worked. Plus many more things.
Why do you know it didn't make you happier? Like you would do it, and
I mean, I just couldn't tell. It just didn't seem like it was doing anything. And of course, people who love to meditate are like, well, that just means you have to meditate longer, and like you got to keep going. You need it all the more. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm just not going to.
So, but then it kind of underlines like what is I hate to ask a cliche question, but like, what is happiness?
Yeah.
Like, is it just some neurochemicals, spiking in our brain, or because obviously to achieve. There's a term for this. Sometimes we aim for the smaller mountaintops because we don't see the bigger mountaintops beyond the valley.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes in order to be good at something, or to achieve success at something, or even happiness at something, you have to go through some valleys and some suffering and some failure to kind of achieve deeper highs.
Mm-hmm.
And
fortunately, life supplies those. We don't have to go out of our ways to find challenges and troughs. But I started my career in law, and so I spent an entire semester arguing about the definition of contract and the definition of tort. And happiness is even more complex a concept to describe. There's something like 15 academic definitions of happiness. So I never really tried to define it. And if you want to say it's peace, and somebody else wants to say it's bliss, or life satisfaction, or well-being, or I think, well, the word happiness is big enough to encompass all those meanings. And I think for the average person, I mean, scientists have to agree on a term in order to study something. But I think for the average person, it's easier and more helpful to think about, well, what would make me happier? Whatever I conceive of happiness to be, if I did this or did that, would that make me happier? And I think for most people, that's pretty clear. Like, they're like, yeah, I think that would make me happier. And then you could just try it and see, like, well, do I feel happier? However I conceive of happiness. Because when you start focusing on happiness, it's like, well, what is it? How do you get there? Can you stay there? I don't find it's very helpful.
Well, what's like a sample decision where you had to make recently where if you went one direction, you would have been unhappy, and you felt like if you went this other direction, you would be happy?
Well, I don't know that it was like that, but a way where my happiness thinking came into play. It's okay so I clerked on the Supreme Court, and we are coming up on our 25th anniversary of like the October term when my cohort of clerks clerked. And I was thinking, we should have a reunion. And then it occurred to me, well, if anybody, I'm going to have to be the one to play in that reunion. No one else is going to play in that reunion. If I think there's going to have to be a reunion, I will have to lead the charge unless someone like mysteriously and magically drops from the heavens, which I don't think they will. And I think before I had studied happiness so much, I would have thought, this is so much time. It's so much effort. There's no reason I should be the one to do it. Like I hope somebody does, but I'm not going to worry about it. But now I know from happiness, I'm like, the key to happiness is relationships. Anything that deepens or broadens relationships makes us happier. We feel sad when we feel that someone has drifted away. It's very exciting and pleasing to us when someone comes back into our lives. These are people who are very important to me. Many of them I'm really, really good friends with. Some I see all the time. Some I rarely see, but would love to see them more often. We shared a really important experience together. If we're ever going to do it, this is the time. And the fact is, I'm the one to do it, And so, not that I do all the work myself, but I have to be the one to kind of start the ball rolling. And having thought so much about happiness, I'm like, yeah, I should do it. It will be a nuisance. It will be a pain. There are many times when I will be like, I wish I weren't doing this. But I will be very happy that I did it. And I don't think I would have had I would not have analyzed that the same way, 10 years ago.
So do you think, like before you started on this project, were you feeling lacking in your relationships and in your friendships?
No, I was pretty happy. And in that way, I was like most people. Most people all around the world, they say they're pretty happy or very happy. Most people are pretty happy. So I was pretty happy. I was not coming from a place of deep unhappiness, but I did feel like I thought I could be happier. And one of the things I wanted to do was to appreciate my happiness more. Like I felt like I was taking it for granted and I wasn't really appreciating everything that I had. And I had so much to be happy about. So I did want to feel more grateful for it, more mindfully grateful for it. And then I just felt like there was probably low-hanging fruit, of which there was a ton. And I think that's true for many people, is there's a lot of things we can do without taking a lot of time, energy, or money that will boost our happiness. So to me, it seems like kind of a waste not to think about those things and to take advantage of them.
Like what are some of them I could do today? I mean, I'm sure I could go back and read your book and
well, like read more. A lot of people say to me, I really wish I could read more. I love to read and I just don't make time to read. It's like, okay, let's think about that. Okay, are you a morning person or a night person? Do you want to join a book group? That could be a fun way to have friends and get more reading done. Do you spend a lot of time looking for things? The average American spends 55 minutes a day looking for things. Maybe we can clear your clutter and then you're going to have an extra half an hour to read every day. Maybe you're trying to read before bed because that's kind of a classic time to read. Like, I can't read before bed. I'm too tired. So maybe that's not working for you. Maybe you'd like to get up early and read. Maybe, there's like a million solutions for that, but you have to begin to say, I think I would be happier if I read more. And now I have to think about, is there a way that I could read more? And then it's like, well, then if you have trouble forming the habit of reading more, why are you having trouble with that habit? And that was my book, Better Than Before, which is, I was just curious, like people say things, they would like to do things that they know would make them happier, and then they don't follow through. Why not? Usually it's a problem of habit formation. So that was a book that was all about how do you change your habits? If you want to read more and you're not reading more, how can you change your habits so you do read more?
Is there something where like if you do something for so many days in a row, then now it's a new habit?
No. No. That alas, that is not true.
So I want to get back to the relationships thing for 1 second. How many friends do you think someone should have? Like I feel like as I get older, I have fewer and fewer friends. And because more people hate me. But
I don't think that that's an answer where there's one answer. I think, to me, a lot of times there is no magic one size fits all solution or answer that fits for everybody. I think some people want to have fewer relationships, what they want to manage fewer relationships, and some people want to manage more relationships. And I think for each of us, and I've seen that, what is it, Dubner's law or whatever that law is, about like people can handle like 150 relationships. Even that, which is sort of like allegedly founded in evolutionary psychology, I'm like, I think people have really different aptitudes. I think some people can have a big circle and manage a big circle, and some people don't want a big circle.
I sort of feel like my alone time. I
Yeah.
feel like I don't need as many
Yeah.
close friends as other people. But at the same time, I get scared. When I think about it, I get anxious. Oh, when I get older, I'm not going to have any friends.
Well, that's a very good thing to think about, because one of the things that's really important as we get older is to have active friendships, and that's one of the reasons why people who have friends of different ages tend to be happier. And what is that thing? Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver, one is gold. I mean, you really you to be happy, we need friendships, we need bonds, we need to be able to confide, we need to feel like we belong. And you don't want to get to the point where you're 80 years old and basically you don't have any friends left. So I think it's worth thinking about maintaining relationships.
But like, I literally don't have any friends from, let's say, 30 years ago. So do you think it's too late to start making friends?
No, but you might want to just go out of your way to maintain friendships that you have. I mean, a lot of us have friendships that are kind of not drifting away, but they're further out of reach than they were. And Elizabeth, actually, my sister and I talked about this on the Happier podcast, which is you can revive a dormant friendship. Often there are people in our lives where you're like, you were the neighbor I was super close to, but then you moved away and then we kind of lost touch. But we were really, really good friends. Like maybe I can reconnect with you. Or, we were really, really good friends in high school and I haven't seen you in a long time, but we still have this like shared history together. We probably would still like each other if we saw each other. Or maybe you're the one that got away. Like I always really liked you and I thought you were so cool. And I always wished that we could be friends, but somehow we were too busy and we never took it to that next level. But maybe now I could say like, hey, I was thinking of you for some reason. So sometimes there are possibilities in our past if we look. Or you can join a group. That's a great way to make new friends if you start a group or join a group.
Is it like, I feel like when you're in college,
it's easy.
It's easy, and not only that, you're like in the trenches with somebody. Like you're day and night, like doing homework, dealing with relationships.
You're all the same age. You're at the same stage.
Like now, at the age of 51, it's different. It's not like, it's not like you call people up and say, "Hey, let's hang out."
Right. Well, and that's one of the most common happiness challenges that adults talk about is wanting to have more friends. But like I do think joining or starting a group is a great way to make friends. For instance, I'm in a writers group, which I made lots of friends in when I joined this writers group. And somebody there said, "Oh, I've started a podcast group. Do you want to be part of the podcast group?" And I was like, "This sounds really cool." And she was telling me, and they get together and they really talk about podcasts, which is something that I'm interested in, kind of the new thing and their theories about like what makes for a good podcast. And I don't know the woman who started it very well, but she seems really cool. And then I'm like, and then it's all her friends. And there's something called triadic closure, which is the easiest way to make friends is to make friends with the friends of our friends. So if you and I are friends, it's easier for me to make a friend of somebody who's already your friend than some stranger. And so joining a group, it's like, well, you're joining a social network because people know each other. So that's easier than just asking random, this person, that person out for coffee, which can feel very awkward. I also like a group because you have something in common. Like you have oh, we're all interested in podcasts, or, oh, we all read the same book, or, oh, we're all obsessed with the Real Housewives franchise or whatever, or like.
I'll join that group.
Yeah. That's my sister's group. Or like my father-in-law was in a group where they talked about fly fishing. They didn't even go fly fishing. They just talked about fly fishing. But for them, it was like, this is incredibly fun. Like all we want to do is talk about fly fishing. So, and the thing about a group too is so it's an easy way to expand your circle. And it's also, it sounds funny to talk about efficiency and friendship, but it is efficient because you're seeing, like a handful or maybe up to like 15 people at one time. And if you miss it, then they meet again. And so you're not making a lot of one-off plans, which is very tiring. And then like, oh, I can't come. And so now we have to reschedule. This is like, come if you can. If you can't make it, I'll see you in March. And if I can't see you then, maybe I'll see you in April. It's just a good way if you're feeling like you're casting about for ways to make friends. I heard of a group of guys who had a group where they were like, realistically, we're not going to read a book. So they took turns choosing famous New Yorker profiles. So they would all read like the Johnny Carson profile or whatever. And these are beautifully written. They're, classics of literature. They're about really interesting people. And what are they? Probably like 3,000 to 5,000 words. So, and everybody can get them. And I thought, well, that's a great idea because it's like gives you something to talk about. It's an interesting thing to do. It's very manageable. So it's a realistic thing. You're going to be able to follow through. And you'll probably meet some people that you'd like to be friends with.
So on a different angle, what's the relationship between personal freedom and happiness? So a lot of people will say, and there's also a linkage between personal freedom and money. Because if some people, they have mortgages, 10 kids, college, student debt, and there's no end, so they have to work 3 jobs, and they're worried about being fired. And
well, that's a lack of money problem. That's not a money problem.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Right. So either way, what do you say to them if they say, "Okay, I'm going to worry about happiness after I worry about money"?
Yeah.
It's easy for her to say she could join her podcast group and do her gratitude journal, and I've got to wake up at 5 a.m. and feed the kids, and then 10 p.m. finally get to sleep and.
Right. Well, it's interesting about money because it's clear that money can't buy happiness, but it's also clear that money can buy many things that contribute greatly to happiness. And one of the luxuries, as your example points out, is one of the greatest luxuries that money can buy is the freedom from having to worry about money. So not having to worry about the mortgage or not having to worry about the college tuition is a tremendous luxury that money can buy. And then money can also buy you time. It can get you out of doing boring chores, which is that's like a real drain on people's happiness. It's like having to do repetitive, boring chores. So maybe you can hire somebody to like do to like mow the grass so you don't have to. But the thing about money is it's really how you use it because, you can use your money to buy a bunch of cocaine and that would have one effect on your happiness, or you could buy like a mountain bike and go mountain biking. It's interesting. A lot of people say, oh, well, research shows that you're better off from a happiness perspective buying experiences rather than things. But I think this is like a more subtle distinction than is often recognized because often things represent or contribute to an experience because it's like the fun of mountain biking requires a mountain bike. Or like if I want to entertain more, that's easier if I have a dining room table. Or if I want to, maybe I want to get a cool camera, or I want to learn to play guitar, or I want to get a dog. All of these things are like a thing that I buy, but then they also really are leading to an experience. And so sometimes it's like, if it's your 10th pair of black boots, that's not going to move the needle. Or if you buy a fancy set of kitchen knives because you want to impress everybody who comes into your kitchen, but you never actually use them, it's not going to make any difference. But if you actually cook all the time and you had a bad set of kitchen knives and now you have a really terrific set of kitchen knives, that can really make you happy every day, for like a year because you're like, oh my gosh, I just love having these really good knives because good tools can make work a joy. So I think money can really make a difference in happiness, depending on if you spend it wisely.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks.
This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. Look, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. So let's get in. All this is related to your most recent book, which is, Outer Order, Inner Calm. And I was interested in the book. I've been through my own set of experiences with.
Yes, let's talk about that.
I basically, at one point, this was several years ago, I had two leases coming up, one upstate, one here in the city, rental leases.
Homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really was not good at dealing with paperwork. And so I didn't want to renew the leases. I didn't want to rent anywhere new because renting in New York City is very complicated. You
Yes.
need like 6 references
Yes.
and bank statements and accounting statements and credit card checks and background checks and all this other stuff. So I was kind of at a loss where I couldn't really renew my rental agreements for various reasons, and I didn't want to rent anywhere new, and I didn't want to deal with storage. I had 40 years worth of stuff at
did.
that time, and spread across 2 places, and I just decided I'm gonna throw everything out, like 100% of everything. Except I went on a trip with a carry-on bag, and while I was on the trip, I said to a friend of mine, "You can go to my places, either throw everything out." Give anything away that you want, keep anything that you want, or sell anything that you want, and don't call me at all. And she only called me once during the week, and she said, "Are you sure you want me to throw out your diploma? You worked really hard for that." And I said, I've got no use for my diploma at all. Burn that one. Definitely don't do
What
anything
about
else.
photographs?
I got rid of all photographs.
Did you digitize them or did you just
Nope,
toss them?
just toss. I didn't, because I didn't go back to any place beforehand. I didn't have a chance.
So you didn't prepare.
To prepare.
You didn't. Okay.
So there was no. That was the other thing too. There was no preparation in this. Like the decision happened, and I made it, and I left town, and that was it. There was nothing I could do.
Well, see, it's interesting because I've heard many people kind of have a fantasy of like something that would wipe everything away, kind of against their volition, so that there would be a fire or a flood and everything would just be swept away. And you did that to yourself.
I did it, and people said, "Oh, were you really happy, or you must have felt really free afterwards?" And the answer is no. Like, for instance, I miss the photographs of when I was a kid or when my kids were kids. But my goal wasn't necessarily my goal that I was telling myself wasn't necessarily happiness. I just didn't want anything anymore.
Right.
And for years, I lived in Airbnbs then, so you don't have to.
For years you did?
Yeah.
How long?
About 3 years.
Really?
And every time I would go to a store and say, "Oh, this looks neat. I feel like buying this," it would be a discipline. I wouldn't be able to buy it because it had to fit in my bag. Like I couldn't buy, since I was living in Airbnbs and moving every few days sometimes, I couldn't buy anything that would be not fit in my bag.
Right. Well, it's interesting because this idea of relinquishment is like a very common theme in human nature. Like many people are very drawn to the idea of like giving up everything or, voluntary poverty and things of that nature. And also like, and it's interesting. I wish I'd talked to you when I was writing my book, Happier at Home, because it's very unusual for someone not to have an idea of home, even if they're like, I'm traveling around the world, but my stuff is at my parents' house or something. Like most people have kind of like a center. It sounds like you didn't have a center.
I didn't, and I was moving from Airbnb to Airbnb.
Yeah, no, so you weren't even in the same place for 6 months.
Yeah, there was never a time I was in a place for 6 months.
And did you love kind of like going to a new neighborhood and kind of having to figure out your way around and where's the grocery store? And
well, I never went to the grocery store. That was the other thing, is I never would shop. I would never have anything in the house. So other than my bag, I would not bring anything into the Airbnb. So food.
You did everything out.
I did everything out, or I would order delivery.
Okay. Okay. So it was like it had to be taken out in the garbage the next day.
Like I had to basically be able to. It almost sounds like I was a criminal, but I had to basically be able to disappear within a minute. I had to basically just be able to pick up my bag and leave the place, and that was it, and without looking back.
Interesting.
So if I bought food, you got to clean the cabinets.
Right. Sure.
In an Airbnb,
if you bought a carton of eggs, it's like, well, then you need a skillet and a spatula, and then like you've got all these eggs that you're going to bring them with you. So then you need a bag to put the carton of eggs in, and it gets you into that whole thing.
And then there was other things too, which is that I liked ordering delivery because I lost weight. And so what happens is, for me,
I don't think that would be true for everyone, but yeah.
But like, people have less and less willpower supposedly towards the end of the day, and that's when everyone goes shopping. That's when I would go shopping at the grocery store. And if I go in a grocery store and I see a bag of chips, I'm buying that bag of chips, and the entire bag is going in my stomach.
I see.
So you can't order from people say, "Oh, restaurant food's so rich, it's better to go to the grocery store." For me, you can't you can't order a bag of Doritos for delivery at a restaurant.
Sure.
So
That's
I would
so
never order
interesting.
dessert at a restaurant. I would just order my meal and that's it.
That is a great example of
So
how people.
no snacking then.
You're
if I-
right. No, that's a great example of how people are different because it's the same thing with like when people are trying to control their spending. A lot of times they're like, oh, only pay with cash because people feel the pain of cash. But some people are actually better off using credit cards because having the statement makes them feel more accountable. So it's like, again, there's no one right answer. For some people, it's more healthful to cook. For you, it's more healthful like to stay out of the grocery store and order in. So that's like, I love that example. But coming to this idea of, and I mean, there is this tremendous decision fatigue. This is a thing, it's a theme that runs throughout Outer Order, Inner Calm, which is like needing to decide what to keep. And if you're not keeping it, what to do with it. Do you donate it? Do you recycle it?
Right,
How
so-
do you give it away? And you just were like,
So
well,
I had
you
no
outsourced
decision
it.
fatigue
Yeah.
whatsoever.
well, I want to hear about this friend who did it. Did you pay? That's a big job.
I did pay, but I also said she could keep
Oh, okay.
and whatever she
And-
wanted. So she
right.
kept couches,
Okay,
beds.
good. So it was like
she
a
would
great,
sell things and keep that.
okay.
And
so it was a good complimentary.
But I definitely had sentimental stuff. Like I had collected various things, and all of that
Ooh.
was either gone or I don't even know what she did with it. Like she would hopefully sell some because there were some things that were valuable. But I didn't say anything before or after. I just got rid of everything.
And was this tied to anything else that was going on in your life? Like, or was it just the 2 leases coming up? Or was there something in your life where you're like, I need a fresh start. I need a clean slate. I have to get rid of everything that was related to my life.
I don't think I consciously thought of it that way, but I had a big relationship ending. And so that, was sort of part of that, I guess.
And so you mentioned you have children. What did they think of you doing this? It seems to me like it would be a very, for a parent to do that might be kind of alarming to a child.
It could be, maybe I don't understand the effect it had on them. Like,
what did they think of it at the time?
They live with their mom, so all of their stuff, their main stuff, is at their home.
Yeah.
But they did see, of course, their bed being wheeled out by a group of people they didn't know.
And now you didn't have a home. Like, did they feel kind of worried for you, or that
because
you were so dispossessed of everything?
Yeah, because their friends' parents read my stuff. So like their friends would come up to them and say, Josie,
what's your dad doing?
Is your daddy homeless?
Yeah,
what's going on?
Yeah.
And
You're like,
so they would visit me at different Airbnbs.
Yeah.
And, for them it was a little more fun. Like they would, wherever I was staying, they would see what restaurants were near.
Sure.
You know,
it's kind of adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did visit, one of them visited once just to make sure I wasn't homeless. And at that time, it was one of the first places I was staying. I was just staying with a friend and he was out of town and it was a nice apartment. So it helps to have friends that have nice apartments too.
Right. So they see that
process.
you're comfortable and that it's not sketchy.
But for all I know, it's definitely a different sort of experience for a kid. Maybe it's affected them in ways I don't understand or haven't thought about or didn't care about, which maybe I should have cared about. But at the time, I saw no other choice. Like
Sure.
I had such decision fatigue.
Yes.
That I didn't want to decide anything. I was really burnt out.
Yes. And you just wanted to throw it all away.
Yeah. And so I did. And then every, either a few days or a few weeks or a few months, I'd move to a different place. And I'm not much of a traveler. I would mostly just move around in New York City.
Yeah.
And, and every Airbnb has all the things you need, like towels,
toilet
dishes.
paper.
Yeah.
So, what's funny, because I wrote a strange little book years ago called Profane Waste, and it's all about why owners choose to destroy their own possessions. So I've actually thought a lot about why people would destroy their own possessions, which is essentially what you did. You didn't actually burn them, which like a lot of people will actually want to torch them. But you cast them off without a backward glance and without any kind of and it's just very interesting. And so how do you feel now about your relationships to objects?
It definitely changed my relationship to objects. Like what I noticed after just a few months of this was that it became very natural to suppress any urge to want anything. So if I wanted a new book, I wouldn't go to a bookstore. I would go on the Kindle and see if it was on the Kindle, but I would suppress the urge to just buy a book, or I would suppress the urge to buy a shirt or a sweater. Like I would buy every week, I'd go to Duane Reade, the local drugstore, and for $14, you could buy 3 T-shirts. and that's what I would do because I was lazy about washing clothes. So I would just go to Duane Reade and buy T-shirts and underwear, and that's it, and then throw out the old and bring in the new. And
So it's interesting because this, in a way, is the expensive version. It's not voluntary poverty because you're eating out all the time. You're staying in an Airbnb. You've got a cell phone. You've got a laptop, and you're buying new T-shirts every week. So it's interesting because
but the T-shirts are just $14.
right,
So-
right. But it's not. But it is not an idea of. It's not a minimalism. It's a kind of pulling back from engaging in stuff.
I agree. Like at one point, the New York Times did a profile of what I was doing, and I kept saying to them, "Look, a homeless person actually is minimalist.
Right.
This is sort of
This is
privileged
voluntary.
minimalism."
Yeah. This is a choice, which makes it even more interesting.
The flip side is though, let's look at the monetary choices that people do. I didn't have a car, let alone 2 cars, which is like the average. So that saves however many tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
And
that's one of the good parts about New York City. You get to put that you get to check that box. Yeah.
But like the average houses in New York City, I don't know what it costs, but let's even say in the suburbs of New York City, the average house might be $500,000. You're putting, $200,000 down, and then you're paying taxes and maintenance, and you have to fix things,
mow the lawn, and
so I didn't have to spend a dime.
No. I'm not saying it's expensive, but it's interesting. It's not like you went into it being like, I want to spend $10 a day or something like that. I remember when I was out of college, I forget what the number was, but it was like I aimed to spend like $5 a day or something, except on laundry day. And there is something kind of exciting about really trying to embrace a discipline, and it sounds like that's. But so now you feel like that's just become second nature to you, so you don't have that impulse to acquire the way you did.
Not as much. I'm rebuilding that now, and so I'm kind of giving myself permission that if I like something, it's okay to buy it, and I'm being okay with that.
So, and what do you find yourself most like? Like, what are the first things that come back? Is it books?
Books are the first thing that came back.
Books are the first thing.
So I'll go out of my way now to go to a bookstore and buy like 10 books just to fill up a bookcase. Now that I do live in an apartment again.
Yeah.
But that's almost it. With minor exceptions.
Well, it's interesting how technology makes it easier because it used to be like it might have been very painful to give up, like if you had a big record collection or a big CD collection or, but now it's like you don't need a CD collection. You don't need DVDs.
Well,
you don't need your camera equipment. You don't need your everything can be like so many things you can have with you.
But this gets to your point of, do you need it? Do you use it? Do you love it? What do you really need? What do you really use? And what do you really love?
Yes, exactly.
I found that I didn't really need, use, or love anything that I owned. Now, love, not true, because I did love some of the things that I threw out, and I was okay being sad about them. That's the other thing, too, is that you have to be okay being sad or at least melancholy.
You were like, this is just...
Yes, I was definitely sad about some things that I'd given up, but I was okay with that. Like happiness...
Right.
My
you
theory
embraced
was,
your decision.
Yeah, I didn't have to be happy all the time.
Right.
But my other argument was I didn't really need anything because somebody else would supply it. And Airbnbs could be expensive or they could be cheap, but they all have everything.
Yes.
So
you have a bath towel. You have yeah.
What do you actually need?
Right. Well, reason not the need, right? That's like we're way past need. You don't need much. I mean, what does one need? One needs almost nothing. But that's not that. But the common experience of mankind is that we have more than we need. But the fact is, if you don't need it and you don't use it and you don't love it, it doesn't fit any three of those things. Then it's really what purpose is it serving? That is the mystery chord that's in the corner of the cupboard where nobody knows what it is. It's that kind of thing. Or the 2 garlic presses. Nobody needs it. Nobody uses it. Nobody loves it. Why do we have it?
But I feel like it's too hard a decision. Like decision fatigue is a real thing.
It is. Yes.
Like
it is.
That's a real stress. And by the way, the regrets you mentioned also, like, if you buy a guitar because you're going to take guitar lessons and then you never take guitar lessons, that's also a real thing, like seeing your regrets just littered all around the house. But the decision fatigue part it was I had read the Marie Kondo book, for instance, before throwing out everything, and she says in there, "Oh, hold something close, and if you feel like you love it, then keep it."
Spark joy.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that.
Yes.
Like
right.
that seemed
Seemed
like
too hard.
yeah, it's very hard,
Yeah.
and I and then I would question like, well, why do I love just an object?
Well, that's interesting. So there was this interesting study done by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, if I've got his name correctly, the guy famous for flow. And they did this interesting study in London, and they were asking people about the objects that were important to them. So they would ask them, what's important to you and why? And so people would say, well, this was my father's chair or whatever. And there were a certain group of people who said, things are not important to me. People are important, but things are not important. And they said, well, that sounded very convincing, except that when they looked at the actual people, what they found is that the people who gave that answer were the ones who were the most detached and isolated. And that actually people who are highly engaged with other people tend to embody those relationships in possessions. And so that's part of the decision fatigue. It's like these possessions are more than possessions. My grandfather's clock does represent my grandfather to me. And to get rid of that clock, I have to face the fact that it was important to my grandfather. In my mind, it's connected to my grandfather. Can I let go of this clock? Like, do I have something that, like, what am I going to do with that? And that is tiring. That is very tiring. But I think it's important.
Right, because you have hundreds of things like that.
Well, I don't actually. See, that was one of the things. I have 3 things that remind me of my grandparents. I have, for whatever reason, I have my grandfather's clock. He collected clocks. Oh, and I also have his stopwatch. He was a railroad engineer. So his like pocket watch was super, super, super important. That's a beautiful object. So that's just like a decorative object. Then I had this like weird China flamingo that when I was little, I just loved. And so, and then this carnival glass, which I've never seen anywhere but in my grandparents' house, which is like this weird glass plate. And when my grandparents died, they said, what do you want? And I'm like, I want the plate. I want the flamingo. And they were like, okay, take a clock. And I'm like, those are all the things that I have of my grandparents. That's all that I need. Do I need all of them? I don't need all of them, but they all do remind me of my childhood. They bring back the look of my grandparents' house. They're small enough that they're easy to store. It's not my grandfather's desk. It's not my grandmother's lounge chair. These are things that I can just keep very easily. And yet I do feel like if I didn't have them, my life would be less rich because they do bring back a time and a place and those people for me.
So, but that's an interesting phrase. Your life would be less rich. So let's say someone came in today to your apartment and stole those things, and you went back and you saw that they were gone, and of course you would be sad and horrified, and you were robbed, and this was not that
Who's going to take my flamingo? Yeah, but okay, somebody did. Yeah,
and presumably you would have the resources to internally to bounce back and have an equally rich life.
Yes, I would.
So
Is
why
it
not do that?
equally rich? It's not equally rich. It's rich.
It's rich. Maybe the texture is a little different. Like
the
it's hard to
texture's different.
compare.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So I'm playing devil's advocate, but I'm not necessarily disagreeing. I like I said, if I was sad when certain things were gone, I would have been happy to have kept certain
but
things.
You just were at a point where you wanted to just wipe it away. Yeah,
but
totally
I don't necessarily think my life is any less as a result. It's just I have different set of feelings as a result,
sure,
and a different set of disciplines even as a result, because the whole process gave me a discipline. But again, I guess what you're saying is, look, if it meets these qualifications, need, use, love, then the richness in life compensates for keeping it, and that's how you balance it out.
Well, because I think people want to end up in very different places. Like some people really want to be minimal and they want to have as little as possible. And I think, and those are simplicity lovers too often. But then some people are abundance lovers and they want collections and profusion and choice and they like having a lot of things around. And I don't think that one's better and one's worse. I just think that people like different levels of possessions. It sounds like you were in a place where you were so burned out and so overwhelmed by ownership that you just had to throw everything away. that's an extreme situation. Like, I don't think I've ever approached that. I don't feel like my possessions are such and like I only have the one place. So it's like that scene from what's the movie Sex, Lies, and Videotape, where he says, "I just want the one key. I have the key to my car. I don't want an apartment. I don't want anything else. I just want the one key."
Wait, which actor said that?
William Hurt, right?
Okay, I don't know.
Okay, the guy who plays the friend, the interloper friend.
Isn't that James Spader?
James Spader.
Yeah.
That's right, James Spader. James Spader. Well done. Yeah.
So
we've got to go watch that movie right now. It's such a good movie.
I'll tell you a story after the podcast.
Okay. Ooh, okay. Yeah, just want the one key. So I think sometimes, like for me, it's interesting. Like when we were moving, we had to have a storage unit for some of our furniture, and I felt that like it was like Voldemort, like when Harry's soul was split. I hated the feeling of a storage unit. I felt like I did not like the stuff in the kind of a satellite position. I have a friend who has got. She's got stuff in storage units in 4 states. I'm like, I couldn't bear that. And so I completely can kind of identify with your feeling of like feeling too scattered and things just pulling apart and being overwhelming. But I don't have that feeling now. And so I feel like I can handle the carnival glass and the flamingo and the clock. And so I think for all of us, we sort of we feel we have different aptitudes and affinities, and also different levels imposed on us by our life. I mean, like for some people, if you have 5 kids, it's like no matter what you do, that's a lot going on. That's a lot of stuff to manage. And I think for a lot of people, that's very, very overwhelming. Some people might thrive in that. Many people would find it very, various levels of distressing while they're kind of in the season of stuff that would come from a big family like that. But people are different in how much they want and how much they can kind of stand.
But how do you like the decision fatigue is hard? Like let's say 2 years ago I wanted to take guitar lessons, so I bought a guitar and now it's sitting at the bottom of my closet. When I'm actually looking at the guitar, I could say to myself, "Oh yeah, I would really love to play the guitar. I should really try again to play the guitar."
Yeah.
The decision fatigue could be overwhelming.
Yeah.
I can't decide to get rid of this guitar because of the combination of the regret, and maybe I do love learning the guitar, but I'm never going to actually have the time to do it.
Well, that's the fantasy self. The fantasy self is the James who's going to learn to play guitar. But we know that fantasy is not real because you've had the guitar for 2 years. So what you could do, if you felt like I can't let go of it, you could say, I'm going to give myself a month. And if I really take an action towards playing guitar, then I will keep it. And if I haven't really done it, then I won't. And you won't, probably, and then you can get rid of it because you've given yourself sort of a deadline.
What do you think of this idea, which is kind of like in between almost the different techniques, which is put everything away, or let's just hypothetically call it storage in quotes.
Right.
Put everything in storage for a month or 2 months, and whatever you don't pull out in those 2 months is what you throw away.
That's a great adaptation of an idea I've heard many times, which is like, and I talk about it in the book, a mystery box, where it's like, if there's cords or, there's things where you're like, is this important or not? I can't really tell. Like, it's a remote control device. Like, does it go to anything I actually use? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I can't tell. And then it's like, don't open the box. But if you haven't gone in to get something out of the box, you can just get rid of it in a year because or 6 months or whatever the deadline is. But I like your way better, which is like have a whole room and just put everything in there that you have any question about. And if you haven't retrieved it, then you know. So it's like, it's not even a mystery box. It's a mystery whole room. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think for a lot of people, they kind of know. They're like, okay, I'm not going to finish that project. It's just like, it seemed like it would be fun, but I'm really just not.
What were some of the surprising things that you threw out when you were going through your, I'm assuming this book was triggered by you going through a cleaning period.
Yes.
What did trigger this book?
Well, one thing that was funny is, so I have a daughter who's even way more relentless than I am. And so I have a very tiny office. It was once a water tower in New York City, and it was converted into a storage room, and then I converted it into my office, so it's small. And I thought it was pretty clutter-free, partly because it's small and and I'm not so cluttery. But I brought Eleanor in there to see if there was anything else to get rid of. And we got rid of 3 giant bags of stuff, some to be given away and some to be tossed and recycled. And I was astonished by how much she was able to identify. And I realized one of my problems is things that are perfectly good. So like I was part of an organization where, and this was very wasteful, and I talked to them about it, but they kept doing it. They would every time we had a meeting, they would send like this little, like a very nice 1-inch binder, like one of those hard binders, and it would have tabs in it. It was a very nice binder. And so I would take all the materials out and I would keep the binder because I'm like, this is a perfectly good binder. Maybe I'll need a binder. Well, what I hadn't realized is I had like 13 of them just like lined up. And she was like, when do you ever use a binder? And I'm like, well, I haven't used a binder in a long time, but maybe I would use a binder. She's like, okay, you can keep one binder, give the rest of the binders away because you don't need them. But they were perfectly good. And I had just gotten in the habit of being like, oh, I'll just keep this and then maybe I'll use it. And so, and that's what I talk about this in the book about the stockpile. It's very easy to stockpile things because you're like, oh, who knows when I'm going to need a glass jar? Oh, I'll keep this ketchup, and it's like, okay, you got like 1,000 glass jars.
And I think people don't realize how much stuff like that they have.
Yes.
Like how many binder decisions they've made.
Yes.
Because when I was throwing out all my stuff, I thought, my friend, her name's Lisa, I thought Lisa was going to take one day in her car, just, shipping everything out. It turned out like she had to rent an 18-wheeler for a week and bring her cousins, nephews, husband, like everybody for a week.
Yes.
And every day, all day, cleaning out my stuff because I think people don't realize how much stuff they have.
They don't. Well, this is what everybody says is that one of the best ways to clear clutter is to move. And that people, especially people who have moved like several times within 5 or 10 years, or like you, if they get rid of everything all at once, because when you have to like confront it and decide like, do I want to actually pay for a box to put it in, pay to move it, and then figure out what to do with it at the other end? A lot of times things just don't make that cut. Where if I'm like, oh, I've got 13 binders just sitting on a shelf behind my chair, I don't think anything of it. But if I was confronting them and being like, am I going to fill up an entire box with these binders? It's like, no, I don't need these binders. Because I think you're right. People don't realize how much it mounts up. Like how much, like one bookshelf of books, it seems like, 1,000 boxes full of books.
So your daughter Eleanor did this with your tiny office and took out 3 garbage bags full of stuff. What happened when you eventually spread to the whole place?
I just found more and more and more stuff. And it's funny because I also feel like one of the things I've noticed for sure with myself is there's sort of layers. Like you think you've gone through a layer and then you'll go through again and then you'll go through again and you'll see more and more and more things that need to come out. I mean,
what do you mean by a layer?
Oh, like a layer is, okay, maybe you go through, like you have a linen closet and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to get rid of all the towels that have holes in them. So you get rid of the towel and then you're like, that's great. And then you're like, but wait, you know what? I have like all these sets of sheets, but we don't really have any beds this size anymore. It's like a junior size. So we can give these sheets away. Like, even though they're perfectly good, we don't actually use a junior bed anymore. And then you get rid of that. And then like a couple days later, you're like, but I hate that blanket. It's so scratchy. Everybody refuses to use that blanket. And then you're like, okay, we get rid of the blanket. And then you're like, oh, I hate these like beach towels. Like they have this like ugly pattern on them. And we never use beach towels. It's like, okay, now get rid of the beach towels. Somehow it kind of, you have to often need to make several passes through. And I often am begging my friends to help me help them clear clutter because it's like you get the contact high of seeing the clutter, the outer order emerge, but it's none of the decision fatigue or the emotional fatigue. It's a lot easier when it's somebody else's stuff. And what I'll say, like people will go through things. They often are like, don't make me give away too much. And I'll say like, no, this is just, I'm not going to push you, anything that you're not comfortable with. So we'll go through it and we'll do the whole thing and they'll be like, okay, I'm done with my closet. And I'm like, now let's go back. Let's start at the beginning. And I'm just going to let's just look at everything again. And they will get rid of like a whole other wave of things. You sort of have to loosen your grip. And you see that with something like books. Like you're like, I'm going to get rid of all the books that are like duplicates or that I really don't ever want to read again. And then you go back and you're like, but that one's falling apart. Every time I open it up, the pages fall out. That's just trash. Or that one I'm never really going to reread. I didn't finish it the first time. Or, this one's out of date. It's a policy book that's out of date now. I'm not going to reread that. But sometimes you have to go through a couple times. And it's definitely happened to me with my house.
And when you were done, were you happier?
Oh my gosh, I just love it. Yes, I like walk by. I have this one cabinet. It's the cabinet where we had like old DVDs and just like a mishmash cabinet. And it wasn't that crowded, but now it has 3 of the shelves are empty, just like absolutely empty shelves. And I love an empty shelf. And I'll just open up the cabinet door and be like, look, there are my empty shelves. And then there's like a couple things. My sister wrote on the TV show The Shield. So I have a box set of the CDs, which is almost more like it's a sentimental item more than something that I would actually use. But I would actually watch the CDs too. And that's on a shelf. And then some copies of Outer Order, Inner Calm. You know, when a book comes out, as you know, they'll send you a whole bunch of copies so that you can give them away over the coming years. So I have my copies there, and then I've got a bunch of empty shelves.
That hurt me also when I had a whole cabinet, like it was like the James cabinet. It was all my books
In translation.
and all my translations of all the books.
That is fun.
But I don't have that anymore. I don't have any of them.
Yeah, you don't have like the Korean version of
No.
And
I had,
Choose Yourself or
20 books almost. So there was lots of different things, and I was proud of that cabinet, but that was gone.
What's funny too, I think people don't realize is that you have to buy your book. Like, it's almost like people feel like you just kind of have your own supply. And it's so now if you want a copy of your book, you'll have to go buy it.
Yeah. I don't even know what languages my books are in now.
Yeah, no, right. Well, I could see how that would be.
One thing you mentioned in the book, which I think is really interesting, is the relationship between time and money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people underestimate the fact that, either time can buy money, so like you put in the hours and you get paid for it, or money can buy time.
Yes.
So you can pay, for instance, more money to live closer to your job, so your commute's less, so you could have more time. Is a classic example.
Right.
And you point out that it's very valuable to, there's a cliche: money you can never. Money you can always get back, but not even 1 second of time you can get back.
Right.
So time is obviously more valuable than money. But what are some examples where you've used, you've kind of heightened your time rather than things?
Right. Well, this is a really important point. And what you're saying is something that there's been a lot of research on this recently, and a lot of people saying that it's really a mistake that people make is not thinking about how they would be better off using money to buy time. My favorite example, and I think it's in this book, my favorite example was a couple where they fought all the time about household chores. Because, it's very, I fortunately am not in this position. My husband and I are very similarly matched in terms of how much outer order we want to live in, which is great. But often there's a real difference in, or what people value. Like some people really hate dishes in the sink, and other people hate, like toys on the floor or whatever. So it's this common source of conflict. And so this couple they were going to go to marriage counseling because you do this, you don't do that, you never help, it's no fair, I do all the work, you just sit by, blah, 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 blah. So they're going to go to marriage counseling. And then they thought, no, we'll use the money for a house cleaning service. Now their problem is solved.
Oh, yeah, because let's say a marriage counselor might be whatever it is, $100 an hour.
Yes.
You could buy 4 hours of house cleaning service.
And with the marriage counselor, you got to go to the marriage counselor. It's like, we got to what? It's like you're getting all the time back. Yes. And so I was like, okay, that is a really, the one thing you want to get out of is conflict. So can you, if you can afford it, can you throw money at a problem? Or like doing laundry, or there's somebody just emailed me like last week saying that the greatest thing that she had done in 2018 was realizing that she should pay to get her laundry done. Because it is a big drain. Doing repetitive, boring chores is something that really drains people. And so if you can afford it, it's a big happiness booster. And one of the example that you gave is one of the best ones, I think, which is, can you make it easier and more convenient to go someplace? So partly like commutes are something that's a big drain on people's happiness. So that's something to think about using money to, and that talk about something that just adds to the clutter of your life. It's like a long commute. And then also things like, and I wrote about this in Better Than Before, to a comic degree, we are much more likely to do things if they're even slightly more convenient, and much less likely to do things if they're even slightly more inconvenient. So doing something like choosing a gym that's a little bit more expensive but is right across the street from your office makes it far more likely you will go to the gym. And so that's a good place to spend money if you want to exercise.
What other things?
One thing is, and this is, so one of the distinctions that I've observed is overbuyers and underbuyers. So underbuyers are people who don't like to buy and they want to avoid shopping and they don't like doing errands, things like that. Overbuyers really, they will shop, they will buy. They often feel like they have a lot of errands. And so one thing that you can say as an overbuyer is if you feel like you are pressed for time or like you have too much to do, you have too many errands to do, you've got too much stuff to manage, like you've got, 50 rolls of, paper towels, or you've got, or like overbuyers will do things like, this would make a great gift for somebody. So I'm going to buy it, even though I don't really have anybody in mind, but it's just good to have a gift. But then it's like in your house and you have to manage it. So one thing overbuyers can remind themselves is they can store it at the store. I'm going to store that at the store, so I don't need to spend my time or my money or my energy getting that now. I'm just going to leave it at the store, and then if I want it, I can go get it from the store. And so a lot of times that will release that. Like they often will feel like they need to run around and buy a billion things like before they go on a trip. And it's like, do you need any of that stuff? You don't need that stuff.
See, I always figured, and I perfected this during my Airbnb phase, is that I could buy anything at the other end of the trip.
Yes.
So like if I needed a T-shirt in LA, I would just buy a T-shirt in LA instead of buying it here and taking it to LA.
And it's funny because I didn't write about this in the book. It just occurred to me like yesterday as I was looking at some clutter. I was realizing that a lot of clutter in at least our apartment, came from like preparatory purchases. So like I just gave away a bunch of tools. Really, really, really good tools that we never used because when my husband and I were first dating, as a gift, I thought, this would be, or maybe we were moving to our first apartment. So as a birthday present, I got him a toolbox and filled it full of like all these useful tools. Well, he's not very handy, so he doesn't really use these tools. So like we use the hammer, we use the level, we use the tape measure, but he's not using the drill, But yet we've had these things forever. And you're exactly right. What I should have said is, if we need a drill, we'll go buy a drill. If we need a hammer, we'll go buy a hammer. Let's not buy the hammer now, because let's get it at the other end, because we may never get to the point where we would need it. And of course, we never did need a lot of these tools. And so I gave them away to somebody who uses tools all the time and was very happy to have them. But I was like, we've had these for years and years and years and years and never used them. Why is it only occurring to me now to get rid of them? But same thing when you register. I don't think people register the same way that they used to, but it used to be people would register and you'd get everything that you could ever possibly imagine yourself using. It's like, and a huge percentage of those things never got used because it's like, it turns out I don't need a gravy boat, or I don't need a crystal, punch bowl or whatever it is. People have the funniest things and they're like, oh yeah, I never used this fondue set. And it's like, some people use a fondue set all the time, but if you're not the fondue type, get rid of the fondue set.
I don't have a fondue set.
I do not have a fondue set, but my sister and brother-in-law have a fondue set and they use it at least once a year.
I think the closet stuff is classic. I think people should you talk quite a bit about the closet, and I think that's the classic place to start.
Yes.
Just throw out everything that doesn't fit. In my view, throw out everything you bought like more than a year ago that you haven't worn in a few weeks or whatever. It seems like that's the easiest. Even now, when I'm in let's call it accumulation mode, I'll still every month or so I'll go through and just throw out everything that I know I'm not going to wear ever again, or I bought it and I didn't like it and it's just hanging up and there's no reason to throw it out, but I'll still throw it out.
Well, here's a funny, easy tip, and I'm amazed at how often, because I do force myself on my friends. The first thing I say is, let's go through and get rid of all the extra hangers. And most people have an insane number of extra hangers, and you just take out the extra hangers, and all of a sudden there's all this space, and it's like a magic trick. I mean, I was just at a friend's who has a 1-bedroom on the Upper West Side, but he had this really, really big coat closet in his front hall, and I was like, this is amazing. This is such a luxury. And I'm like, but let's get rid of all like the nasty wire hangers that are like left over from the dry cleaners. We're like pulling them out. I mean, there's just like dozens on the floor, and then all of a sudden he has all this extra space, and he's like, that's amazing. I was like, that is the low-hanging fruit, and a lot of people have lots and lots of extra hangers. But like you say, if you manage the clothes that you actually wear and use, you don't need lots of extra, maybe 4 or 5 extra hangers, just so that you're not always like looking for every single hanger, so you have a little bit of margin. But yeah, that's my easiest tip for closets.
Let me see. I have all these pages bookmarked.
Ooh, I like seeing what people mark.
I bookmarked this one. Things. Okay, actually, all three things on this page. First off, the book is really nicely structured because you could kind of start anywhere,
Yeah.
and there's different ideas and things to think about on each page. But this page has beware of buying souvenirs, which I think is really interesting because they're good for memories, but are you ever going to use the souvenir for anything?
Well,
Unless it's like really like an antique or a valuable.
Well, and I don't say don't buy souvenirs. I just say beware of souvenirs because a lot of times people like you're in a new place and everything looks sort of interesting and enticing, but then when you get it home and it's just like on its own, it just like it doesn't have its magic. Now sometimes you have something that really kind of you're like, oh, that's Paris for me, and that's wonderful. But a lot of times the things that people have kind of fall apart in their hands. Like they don't really act like good souvenirs. Often, I think souvenirs they're also better if they're small and easy to store. So things like maybe a postcard from a museum, it's like that's easy to have around. There's like a lot of cool things that people do with postcards, or something like spices, where you're like, ooh, like I went to Morocco and I brought back this spice, and I'm going to make all these Moroccan dishes and use this spice, and it's super fun. And that's kind of an experience and a thing. And then you kind of use it up. And so it's not something that's just like sitting on a shelf forever. But sometimes people really get carried away with souvenirs and then it's also one of these things where they feel like it's hard to let go of it because it feels like it embodies a memory. But it's like, well, but you took pictures probably.
And I also sort of feel like if it's worth remembering, I'll remember it. Like I don't need to buy something to remember it if it's worth remembering.
Right.
I don't need to trigger the memory. If I needed to trigger the memory, I might as well just let the memory go.
But sometimes we do like to have things like, oh, this is my shelf that's Maine. And like, this reminds me of all the things I love about Maine. Or like, this is my trip. Or like my sister had this like kind of ugly mug. And I was like, can we get rid of this ugly mug? And she's like, no, because it was like said like Jacksonville, Florida on it or something. And she's like, no, I bought that mug on the last trip I took with my friend before he died. And so it was like, it really did have a lot of meaning for her, And so, so I wouldn't say never, but I would just say beware and think about what you're buying and why you're buying it. Sometimes people just like, it's just part of an activity. It's like part of what some people like to do when they're traveling is shop. Just like think about what you're buying and whether you're going to want it when you get home.
Then you say things often get messier before they get tidier.
Yes. This is one of
So that I didn't experience. I don't know what that means.
Oh, okay. Well, it just means like if you are pulling everything out of a closet to figure out what you're gonna try on, it's like you can create a big mess. Or like often when I go over to a friend's house to help them clean, I'm like, it is gonna get really, really messy because we're gonna pull everything out. And you're going to be like, oh, well, there's that box, but I think I have the lid, but let's leave it here because I want to see if I find the lid, because if I don't have the lid, then I don't want to keep it. Or, oh, this is a set of napkin rings that I really love, but I think that we accidentally put the other half away over here. So like things are out because they need to be sorted and put in their proper places. And so it can get really, really messy. Now, this is where Marie Kondo's method is you take everything in a category out. Like you take every book in your house and make a big pile, or you take all your clothes and make a big pile. So that method really makes things messier before they get tidier. So it's just something to be aware of. And if you kind of can't bear that, I do have a lot of suggestions for people who want to do just like one shelf in a medicine cabinet. And they're like, I just want to do one drawer.
I like the one shelf at a time method.
Yeah, I don't want to, like people are like, I don't want to create a big mess. I don't want to tackle a lot at one time. I just want to do a little bit each day. And you can get a ton done if you just do a little bit each day. One shelf in the medicine cabinet, that's all you have to do.
And then your next page is identify the problem.
Yeah, I mean, what is the problem? Like, so for instance, for me, one issue in my household, and I was like the worst violator of this, was throwing coats just like on a chair, even on the floor, rather than putting them in the closet. And I realized that the problem was I don't like to use hangers. It's just, call me lazy, but it's just a little bit too much work to use a hanger. But I realized I could use hooks. So I put hooks in our closet doors, and now I always hang up my coat on a hook. So the problem was I didn't want to use a hanger.
Hangers are hard work.
Hangers are hard work.
And it requires
after long
dexterity.
days of nothing. So I'm like, the hook was all I needed. Or like if you keep losing your keys, a lot of times if you just have a place where the keys always go, Or new solution, the tech solution is use the Tile app. A lot of people have told me that for people who lose their keys a lot, this is an app where you can use your phone to find your keys. A lot of people find that's a great
Oh, really?
solution.
What do? Do you put like a thing on the key, like
Yeah.
an RFID chip or something?
Yeah. Yeah. This is great because one of the real principles that I believe in is don't try to change yourself, change your environment. So, like, if you've got somebody who just refuses to put keys in a key bowl, and some people are like this, they just will not put their keys in the key bowl, and then you spend all this time looking for keys. Say like, well, what's another solution? Don't think like, oh, I'm going to change this person because it's very hard to change a person. But like, there's a solution for that. And yeah, you put this thing on their keys, and then you just tap it, and it rings, and you go find the keys. And so this is a good solution.
This reminds me of my grocery store solution, which is that like I can't change myself. If I go to a grocery store, I feel this enormous urge to buy all the chips in the store.
Right. So you just stay
so
out.
I just don't go to the grocery store, and then that stopped snacking for me.
Yes. That's a great solution. Yeah. If you don't want to buy something, don't go in. That's a great. Well, and another way, because the best way to clear clutter is not to buy it in the first place. So you just never acquire it. So you never take the freebie, you never take the swag, you never accept the hand-me-down. And one thing, if you are an impulse shopper online, what a lot of people do, it works for a lot of people, is you delete your accounts so that you always have to shop as a guest. And it's not a huge nuisance to enter in all that information, but it's a little bit of a nuisance. And for a lot of people who are impulse shoppers, just a little bit of inconvenience is enough to get them to pause, to think like, do I really want to buy this? Or it just seems like too much trouble, especially if it's something like late at night. Which, as you pointed out earlier, is a time when a lot of people get up to mischief because they're sort of worn down from the day. You might have enough energy to like look around online, pick something, and buy it with one click. But if you have to be like, oh, I got to look up my credit card number and what's the security code again, and oh, I got to type out my whole address, it's like, I'm too tired.
Yeah, no, that works for me very well as well. Like I never set up accounts anywhere.
Oh, right. So you have to
always enter. But so now you've done all these studies of happiness, or I shouldn't say studies, I should say internal studies. You've been the subject, from
observation.
The Happiness Project, Happier at Home, your book on habits, this one, Outer Order, Inner Calm. What is there? Do you feel like there's an overarching conclusion, like kind of this general direction of happiness that you've been going?
If there's one, because I think all these books are really about human nature, which is all my books I think are about human nature in some way. And I think the one thing that I've really come to believe more and more with every book that I write is that there really is no magic answer. There's no one size fits all solution. No one can say, this is what you should do, this is the way to do it, what you got to do is this, and be able to tell you, because it's like, you're a morning person, I'm a night person. You're a simplicity lover, I'm an abundance lover. You're a finisher, I'm an opener. I'm an abstainer, you're a moderator. I'm a sprinter, you're a marathoner. There's all these people just are different, and what works for one person often doesn't work for another person. And I think sometimes people feel bad about it. They get frustrated. They feel like they should be able to do something, or they should be able to do something in a different way. And I'm like, there's a lot of ways for all of us to achieve our aims in happiness. And it's really just a matter of figuring out what works for you. And there's just a lot of ways to do that. But this idea that somebody can figure it out and tell you the best way, it's just like there can be no best way, because people are different.
What's the general goal? Like, you see a lot of people, they have as a goal, like, okay, I'm going to achieve X, and then I'm going to be happy when I achieve X. And so they work really, really hard, and they achieve it, or they get close to it, and it's just stressing them out whether they're going to get X, or, whether it's success or money or a type of relationship. Like, at some point, when do you just rest and say, okay, I don't need to do, I'm not going to go on that trip. I'm not going to try to make this more money. I'm not going to try to, I don't know, get this project done that I was going to get done. When do you just rest and watch TV? Like, watching TV is fun.
Well, I think you brought up one of the central tensions within happiness. And it's something that, again, we all have to be deciding all the time for ourselves, which is, on the one hand, we want to accept ourselves. And on the other hand, we want to expect more from ourselves. So sometimes we want to accept ourselves, and we want to just say, like, this is who I am. This is what I want. This is what makes me feel good right now. This is what, this is the natural limitation of my nature. And then sometimes we can say, well, I can expect more from myself. I can push myself. I can go outside my comfort zone. I can get myself to do things that make me feel uncomfortable. I can forego something today because I want something else tomorrow. And I think for each of us, it's a balance. You want to accept yourself and you want to expect more from yourself. And I think for each person, it's different. You don't know what, for one person, public speaking should be something that they should push themselves to do. And for someone else, they'd be like, you know what, I'm just never going to do public speaking. It's just, I'm going to worry about other things. I'm not going to worry about that.
Well, what do you push yourself that takes you out of your comfort zone?
Well, right now I'm trying to learn to play the ukulele. I am very, very unmusical, but I did an interview on the Happier podcast with Roz Chast, the brilliant, brilliant cartoonist and writer. And she gave this like impassioned explanation for like how much she loves the ukulele. And I got so excited. I was like, so I bought both my daughters the ukulele. They had no interest in playing the ukulele. And then I thought, I'm going to learn how to like play at least one or two songs.
Do you play the guitar?
Huh?
Do you play the guitar?
When I was in middle school, I took guitar lessons, so I don't remember anything about it. But I had done a stringed instrument way in the past. But I'm super unmusical. Like I'm not interested in music. I don't really listen to music. Like I'm just not a person who's that into music. And so I could say, accept myself, don't do music. But for some reason, I was just like kind of enchanted with this idea of the ukulele. Well, so I got the ukulele, and then it's like it turns out that just tuning it, which I have to say, I'd kind of forgotten about the fact you have to tune stringed instruments, and like it was super frustrating. And I was like, I'm not even trying to play the ukulele. I cannot even tune the darn thing, and I'm already incredibly frustrated. Should I stop? I thought it would be fun to play the ukulele. It turns out it's harder than I thought. I'm kind of frustrated. I feel dumb. I feel like kind of cheated because everybody was saying the ukulele is so easy. Well, so far it's not easy. So do I accept myself and be like, Gretchen, you're not interested in music. What do you care about the ukulele? Move on? Or do I say, okay, Gretchen, I think you can learn to tune a ukulele. You can YouTube that and maybe like figure it out. What do I do? Accept myself or expect more from myself? And I don't want to say accept myself. It always means like settling or like not trying, because I think sometimes accepting yourself is the right thing to do and to say like, well, this is the kind of natural limitations of my nature. I would say I can learn to play a song on the ukulele and I will do that. But on the other hand, I don't expect myself to like buy season tickets to the symphony because I'm like, that's just not Gretchen. Gretchen is not going to want to go to season tickets for the symphony. So I'm not even going to feel bad about the fact that here I am in New York City. There's all this amazing music. There's opera, there's jazz, there's this, there's that. And I ignore all of it and don't take advantage of any of it because that's just Gretchen. Gretchen's not into music.
And what's another comfort zone thing that you push yourself that where it's not necessarily happy at first, but
well, one thing is live shows. I know you do a lot of live performance. But
I hate going to every other kind of show.
You do?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, my sister and I are going to do, we're going to do a podcast live tour for our podcast. And that's like a whole new, I do a lot of public speaking, but this is a whole different way of engaging with an audience. It's more of a performance than just a talk. We have done it twice before, so I have sort of an idea what it's like, but this is like going to be much more intense. We're going to do like 3 in a row. And that's something where I'm like, okay, and this is where it's sometimes good to work with somebody else because my sister, Elizabeth, really wants to do it. And so she's really been she keeps sort of pushing the ball forward. Whereas I think for me, it's not like I wouldn't have articulated this would be a good idea, but I wouldn't have pursued it with the kind of persistence that was necessary to actually get us to the point where we are now. But we're having to do a lot to get ready for it. And
is it in other cities?
Yeah, it's going to be in other cities.
What cities?
Milwaukee, Minneapolis, New York City, and what's the fourth one? I can't remember the fourth one because we had one that it was going to be Detroit, but then Detroit fell through. I forget what the fourth one is. I should know. Again, it's sort of like, okay, I got to get ready for this thing. Yeah. So. And I got a book that's got to come out first. So I have a lot of things in order, but that's something where I'm like, it would be easy to just feel like we both have a lot going on. Let's not ask this of ourselves. But we really do want to expect more from ourselves. But sometimes things just they're just not the right thing for you. They're just not the right aim. It's just not a good fit. Or like here's a good example. I had a friend because there really are morning people and night people. It's largely genetically determined and is a function of age, but it's like a real thing. And I had a friend who I had known since college, and he's just he's been a night person to this day. He can barely get to work on time, and he looked me in the eye and he said, my New Year's resolution is to get up early and go for a run before work every day. And I was like, no, you're not. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but no, you won't. Like, that's not the right thing. Accept yourself. You're a night person. If you want to go for a run or you want to get exercise, do it later in the day when you're more high energy. Like, this is not the right aim for you. It's a good aim, which is to get more exercise, to get more fit. But the way to do this, accept yourself. You're a night person. This isn't going to work for you. You're not going to stick to it. Accept yourself.
Why do you think he wouldn't? I mean, obviously people know if they're night people or morning people. Why do you think he wouldn't? Why do you think he thought that was so easy to change?
Oh, because I don't know why. Because night people say this all the time. They're like, oh, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to make up my mind. And there's all this research showing like, oh, it's really good for you to exercise in the morning, get it done. It like raises your metabolism, lifts your mood. Like there's a million reasons on paper why it makes sense. And night people I think that our culture guilts them. It makes them feel like they should be more morning people. And they kind of keep thinking like that they're going to just make themselves do it. And the fact is sometimes you do, because as you get older, you become more of a morning person. And I remember I was giving a talk and this guy in a very self-congratulatory way stood up and said like, well, for years I was a night person, but finally I just decided I was going to do it. And I think my teenage son should do it too. And I was like, you're 55, man. That's why it's getting easier, and your son is at the peak of nightness because, teenagers and young people are tend to be night in their life cycle. And so he was thinking that he had done this through self-control and like changing his nature. I'm like, you're just aging into being more of a morning person. But I will often say to night people, don't, they'll say, oh, I'm not at my alert. I want to be more alert for this 8:30 a.m. meeting that I have. And I'm like, I think you should really try to see if your boss could move it to 10. Because you're never going to be that sharp at 8:30. It's like, but maybe they can't. Sometimes they can't. Like if you have little kids that need to get to school, you have to get up. But there are a lot of things where you can rearrange your schedule or you can move challenging things later in the day when you feel more prepared. Or like, Maybe it could just be a little bit later and that might make things easier for you. Could turn out that everybody in the meeting is a night person too. Like once you start asking around and once you start feeling like I could just accept this about myself and try to see if I could arrange my circumstances to suit me, that's different from feeling like, well, I need to change because everybody else can be up for an 8:30. Everybody else can get up and exercise before work. Why can't I?
So it seems like there is a theme, which is that clutter is not necessarily just physical clutter. There's also kind of the mental clutter
100%.
Of not trying to do all these things that are not necessarily, kind of central to who you are, like trying to be a day person when you're more of a night person.
Yeah.
Try to do the things that make time uncluttered. So there's a lot of evidence that, and you talk about this on your blog, there's a lot of evidence that, we need downtime. We need uncluttered downtime in order to be happier. And all of these things are related, just kind of having a less clutter in our lives, both internally and externally. And I think, of course, the title summarizes that with outward order, inner calm. And I think it's a great book and it's an important topic. It's a topic that I've lived an extreme of, and I do think it was too extreme. Like I don't necessarily recommend what I did to anybody. It was interesting, but it didn't necessarily make me happier. Although I would say probably a little bit, like just because I had too much decision fatigue. And I think decision fatigue also is a really interesting thing, which is related to the time you spend on things and the messiness that comes before the tidiness is also related to decision fatigue. But again, it's a great book, Outer Order, Inner Calm, which fits all of your other books, beginning with The Happiness Project. I recommend people read this one, but read all of your books. Like they'll make you happier, and happiness is so I feel it's kind of rare. Like I feel it's an uphill battle to be happy all the time. But thanks once again for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's so much fun to
your
talk
third
to
time
you.
on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was so much fun.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.